The moment the thunder cracked like the world splitting in two, I knew I was in for one of those nights. You know, the kind where the silence in our cramped apartment screams louder than the storm outside. There I was, sprawled on the couch, flicking through channels, while he was glued to his laptop. Work, he'd said, without so much as lifting his eyes. Typical. The gap between us felt like miles, not the mere feet of our living room. By the time I wandered into the coffee shop the next day, my head was a mess of frustration and loneliness. Then, like a scene from a movie, there he was, Alex. That old flame never really extinguished. One smile from him and I felt like someone had thrown open the curtains on a gloomy day. "Fancy seeing you here," he said, and just like that, we picked up where we'd left off, years ago. It started with what I told myself were innocent catch-ups. But let's be real, every just coffee with Alex was a step further from my husband and a leap closer to reigniting old passions. Each laugh, each shared memory, felt like a secret whispered behind my husband's back. Then came the bombshell. "Got to head out of town for a bit," my husband mumbled one evening, more to his suitcase than to me. Part of me wanted to protest, to tell him to stay, to notice the growing chasm between us. But another part, the part that ached for something more, something different, saw an opportunity. Alex's face flashed in my mind, and I was torn between guilt and a thrill I hadn't felt in years. Our affair began under the guise of night, hidden from the world's judgmental eyes. A stolen kiss in the shadow of the city, fueled by desire and desperation. I lied to myself, saying it was just a fling. But who was I kidding? Every touch, every whispered promise was a piece of my heart, given away to someone not my husband. The guilt was a relentless beast. In a feeble attempt to ease it, I bought my husband a gift. Something thoughtful, something that screamed, "I'm sorry," without having to utter the words he was oblivious to needing to hear. It was like trying to patch up a gaping wound with a sticky note. His gratitude was a knife twisting in my gut. He became more attentive, more loving, as if sensing he was losing me. And there I was, caught in the eye of a storm I'd summoned myself. My life had become a balancing act, teetering between loyalty and desire, truth and deceit. Every step I took was a dance on the edge of a knife. With Alex, I found an escape, a fire that consumed me with its intensity. Yet, every glance, every touch from my husband reminded me of the life I was betraying. It was a world split in two, and I was the divide, struggling to hold on to both sides, knowing full well I was destined to fall. Just when I thought things couldn't get messier, Alex decided to crank up the drama. Over coffee, in our usual corner of the world, he dropped the bomb. "We should make this official," he said, eyes all but drilling into mine. My heart did a nosedive. Official? As in, leave my husband and turn my back on what was left of my marriage. Panic laced with clarity hit me like a freight train. What in the world was I doing? I knew then what I had to do. It was like waking up from a bad dream and realizing you're late for work. I told Alex it was over, that I couldn't do this anymore. He laughed, but his eyes weren't smiling. "You think you can just walk away?" he said, voice low and dangerous. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear as day. I walked out, my heart pounding, knowing I'd just poked a sleeping bear. Just as I was grappling with the fallout, my husband, bless his heart, threw me a lifeline. "Let's go away for the weekend," he said, out of the blue. Just us. Hope, bright and fragile, fluttered in my chest. Maybe this was our chance, a way to mend what I'd broken. The getaway was like a breath of fresh air, a pause button on the chaos of our lives. But then, in a moment of sheer stupidity, I left my phone out. A message from Alex popped up, and I saw my husband's face change as he read it. My heart sank. The cat was creeping out of the bag, and I wasn't ready to deal with it. After that, things got cold. Real cold. My husband's warmth turned frosty, and conversations were as thin as ice. I could tell he was suspicious, but he didn't say a word. I kept quiet, too, clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this storm would pass. But my husband isn't a man to sit back and wonder. He's a doer, a fixer. Unbeknownst to me, he hired a pie to dig into my mess. I was none the wiser, thinking we were slowly bridging the gap between us. Then came the confrontation. I'll never forget the look on his face as he tossed those photos and messages on the table between us. Betrayal, hurt, anger, it was all there. "Is this what you've been doing?" he asked, voice breaking. The evidence was irrefutable. My secret was out, and the walls of my world came crashing down. I tried to explain, to apologize, but words felt useless, like trying to catch water in a sieve. The damage was done. The trust we'd built over years, shattered in seconds. I had chosen my flame over my spouse, thinking he'd move on, but instead, I was the one left scrambling in the ashes of my choices. The moment he said, separation, it felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I knew I'd messed up, but hearing those words from him, seeing that look of utter betrayal in his eyes, it was a gut punch. I stumbled over my words, trying to find some way to explain, to make him understand how deeply sorry I was. But sorry didn't cut it. Not this time. His decision was made. So, there I was, packing up my life into cardboard boxes, moving out of the home we'd built together. I ended up crashing at my friend Sarah's place, who took me in with a wary eye and a lecture I probably deserved. Nights became a blur of regret and too much wine, each morning a reminder of the mess I'd made. Then, as if on cue, Alex showed up again, popping back into my life with a, "Hey, how are you holding up?" text. Seeing his name on my phone screen, I felt nothing but a hollow emptiness. Whatever fantasy I'd built around us crumbled under the weight of reality. I told him it was over for good, blocking his number before I could second-guess myself. It was one of the few decisions I felt solid about. But the fallout was just beginning. My husband, once the man who'd promised to stand by me through thick and thin, started his own kind of revenge. Word of my infidelity spread through our circles like wildfire, his version painting me as the villain in our story. Suddenly, friends who'd been like family were turning their backs, their cold shoulders a testament to the power of whispered words. Professionally, it was no different. Job opportunities I'd been counting on vanished before my eyes, with polite rejections or ghosted emails becoming the norm. My reputation, it seemed, had preceded me, leaving me scrambling to pick up the pieces of my career. Then came the divorce papers, a cold slab of reality served up by a process server one gloomy Tuesday. Reading through them, I saw my future shrink down to a few lines of legal jargon, the clause about minimal financial support like a slap in the face. He was playing hardball, showing me no quarter. I couldn't just let it happen. I confronted him, hoping to find some shred of the man I'd married, the one who might listen, might understand. Please, we can work out a better settlement, I pleaded, trying to keep my voice steady. But the man standing in front of me was a stranger, his eyes cold and resolute. You're getting what you deserve, he said, his voice void of the warmth I once knew so well. Each word was a nail in the coffin of our shared past, a past that now felt like a distant, foreign land. I walked away from that confrontation with a heavy heart, realizing that the bridge between us had been burned to the ground. My choices had led me here, to this moment of isolation, and the road ahead was one I'd have to walk alone. In the aftermath of my world imploding, I was left picking up the pieces, each shard a reminder of the life I'd shattered. Isolated, I found myself navigating a reality I'd never imagined, one where the echoes of my choices reverberated louder than I could bear. It was like waking up on a different planet, one where the gravity of my decisions weighed me down every single day. Reaching out to old friends felt like clawing at the walls of a well, hoping for a hand to pull me up. But the husband's words had traveled faster than my apologies ever could. Their cold shoulders and averted gazes told me all I needed to know: I was alone in this. Loneliness wasn't just a state of being. It was my new reality, a constant companion that reminded me of the cost of fleeting passions. In a desperate search for purpose, or maybe just a distraction from the mounting despair, I started volunteering at a local charity. Helping others was a balm, albeit a temporary one, for the guilt that gnawed at my insides. It was here, among strangers, that I found a semblance of acceptance, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, I could find a way back to myself. Meanwhile, life seemed to favor the husband, his business thriving as if to mock my downfall. The news of him being seen with someone new, someone not marred by scandal, was a bitter pill. It was as if he'd walked through a storm and come out dry, while I was left drowning in the aftermath. The disparity between our situations was a stark reminder of the consequences of my actions. With my savings dwindling, I was forced to take a modest job that was a far cry from the life I'd once led. Every day was a struggle, a fight to keep my head above water while adjusting to this new normal. The pride I'd once taken in my career was replaced by the humility of starting over, of accepting that this was the price of my freedom, or rather, the cost of my mistakes. Alex reappeared like a ghost from my past, offering financial assistance with strings that felt more like shackles. But accepting his help meant denying the responsibility I bore for the wreckage I'd created. I refused, determined to face the consequences of my actions alone, no matter how daunting that path seemed. Then came the news that knocked the wind out of me. Through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances, I learned of the husband's engagement. The finality of our separation hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the closing of a chapter, the realization that while I was stuck in the past, he'd moved on to a future I had no part in. Each day became about survival, about learning to live with the choices I'd made. The journey was lonely, fraught with challenges and reminders of what I'd lost. But it was also a path to redemption, a chance to rebuild from the ashes of my past. As I faced each day, I clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to forgive myself, even if no one else would. Stumbling upon them at the cafe, like a scene straight out of a movie I never wanted to watch, there they were, him and his fiancée, wrapped up in their bubble of happiness. It was a gut punch, the kind that knocks the wind out of you and leaves you gasping for air. He had moved on, stepping into a future that no longer had any room for me, while I was still shackled to the ghosts of our past. Then, as if fate decided to twist the knife a little deeper, an invitation landed in my mailbox. It was to their wedding, sent by mutual friends blissfully unaware of the chasm that had opened up between us. Holding it in my hands felt like holding a grenade. Do I let it detonate and face the aftermath, or do I toss it away and pretend it never existed? The night before the wedding was a marathon of mental gymnastics. Should I go? Could I go? The idea of closure battled with the fear of reopening wounds so deep they seemed part of my very soul. In the end, the need to see, to know, to finally let go, won out. I decided to attend, cloaked in anonymity, hoping against hope to find some semblance of peace amidst the celebration of what I had lost. Slipping into the wedding felt like stepping into an alternate reality where I was the ghost haunting the edges of their joy. Seeing him so happy, so utterly content, was a blow I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just that he had moved on, it was the realization that I had never truly believed he would. That, in some twisted part of my heart, I thought he'd remain tethered to the ruins of us. The whispers were like daggers. I overheard bits and pieces, snippets of conversations that painted me as the villain of the story. The narrative, it seemed, had been carefully crafted by him, and I was the architect of my own downfall in the eyes of those who once knew us both. Each word, each sideways glance, felt like a confirmation of my worst fears. I was alone, truly alone. Leaving early was both an act of cowardice and preservation. The sight of their happiness, so pure and untainted by the shadows of my actions, was more than I could bear. As I walked away, the enormity of my isolation enveloped me, a cloak made not of invisibility but of stark, unyielding visibility. In a moment of desperation, or perhaps madness, I tried to reach out to him after the wedding. A part of me clung to the hope of forgiveness, of some acknowledgement that what we had was not entirely worth discarding. But the final door slammed shut with the cold finality of a blocked number. No words, no explanation, just a digital chasm as insurmountable as the emotional one that had grown between us. That moment marked the end of whatever thread of connection remained. The realization that I was not just moving on but being forcibly ejected from a past that no longer wanted me. My journey, it seemed, was to be one of solitary reflection, a path littered with the debris of choices I alone had made. The idea of a fresh start in a new city was like a beacon in the fog, promising a chance to shed my past and the heavy coat of shame I'd wrapped around myself. Yet, every time I started to plan, the reality of my financial situation and the fear of the unknown yanked me back. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, wanting to jump but paralyzed by the drop. In search of some semblance of healing, I found myself sitting in a therapist's office, spilling my guts to a stranger. Therapy was never something I'd imagined for myself, yet here I was, trying to navigate through the mire of guilt and loneliness that had become my constant companions. It was a small step, but it felt monumental, like the first breath after being underwater for too long. Meanwhile, life seemed to only be getting sweeter for my ex-husband. His new marriage was a hit on social media, their happy moments splashed across my feed like a series of punches. Each photo, each post, was a reminder of the life I'd lost, the happiness I'd sabotaged. I was a ghost haunting the edges of their perfect world, invisible yet irrevocably chained to the shadows of what once was. In a moment of weakness, or maybe desperation for any human connection, I reached out to Alex. Not because I harbored any romantic feelings, but because I was drowning in isolation. His indifference was a cold shower, a stark reminder that I was alone in this. Alex had moved on, and I was still stuck, unable to find my footing in a world that seemed to have left me behind. Salvation came in an unexpected form, a support group for people grappling with divorce and betrayal. Sitting in a circle, sharing my story, and hearing others, I found a thread of common humanity. It was comforting, in a bittersweet way, to know I wasn't alone in my suffering. The group became a lifeline, a place where my guilt and pain were understood, not judged. It was there, amidst stories of heartbreak and healing, that a flicker of hope began to kindle within me. Listening to tales of redemption and forgiveness, I dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a future for me too. A future where the mistakes of my past didn't define me. That sliver of hope sparked an idea. I started a small online business, pouring my energy into something that was mine alone. It was daunting, stepping into the unknown with nothing but a laptop and a dream. The challenges were many, from technical glitches to days without a single sale, each setback a test of my resolve. But I persisted, driven by a newfound determination. Each small victory, every order, felt like a triumph. The business wasn't just a way to make ends meet. It was a lifeline, pulling me from the depths of despair and giving me a purpose. I learned resilience, discovered strength I didn't know I had, and slowly, I began to rebuild. This journey wasn't just about starting a business or finding a community. It was about learning to stand on my own, to face the consequences of my actions and still dare to hope for a brighter tomorrow. It was about resilience, about finding light in the darkest of places. And as I forged ahead, I realized that this, too, was a form of healing, a way to mend the broken pieces of myself and start anew. The day my little online store started turning a profit was a day I never thought would come. After months of toiling away, of doubts and fears nibbling at the edges of my hope, seeing that first glimmer of success was like breaking the surface after being underwater for too long. It gave me a taste of independence, a sense of self-worth that I hadn't felt in ages. But as sweet as it was, there was a bitterness to it, a reminder of everything it cost me to get here. Success, I realized, was bittersweet. With every achievement, every step forward, I was reminded of the past I couldn't escape, of the choices that had led me to this point. The path I was on was mine alone, shaped by decisions I couldn't take back. It was empowering and isolating in equal measure. Then, out of the blue, a piece of my old life reached out. It wasn't a hand extended in reconciliation but a cold, business-like request from the husband's family. They wanted to finalize the division of our shared assets. It was a stark reminder of how far I'd fallen, of the chasm that now lay between me and the life I once thought would be mine forever. In a moment of clarity, I decided to sell my wedding ring. It was a symbol of a promise broken, of dreams that had turned to dust. Turning it into something as mundane as money to pay off debts felt freeing, a way to shed the weight of a past that was holding me back. As I handed it over, I felt a chapter closing, one painful page at a time. Not long after, whispers reached me, rumors that the husband and his new wife were expecting a child. The news hit me like a physical blow, a stark sign that life moved on, with or without me. It was a strange cocktail of emotions, sadness, relief, and an odd sense of detachment. Any lingering threads of connection to my former life were severed, leaving me adrift in a sea of my own making. In a moment of introspection, I penned a letter of apology to the husband and his new wife. I poured everything into it, my regrets, my apologies, my hopes that they could find the happiness I had once hoped to share with him. It was an offering of peace, a way to say I was sorry for the havoc I'd wrought. But deep down, I knew it was also for me, a step towards healing, towards forgiving myself. The silence that greeted my letter was deafening. No angry rebuttal, no acceptance of my apology, just a void where I had hoped for some sign of forgiveness. It was then I realized that silence was an answer in itself. It was time to truly let go, to accept that some bridges were meant to remain in ashes. So, I turned my gaze forward, focusing on the little victories, the small steps towards rebuilding a life that was mine and mine alone. My business, my independence, my journey towards finding peace, they were all I had, and perhaps, all I needed. The scars I carried would never fully fade, but maybe, just maybe, they could serve as a reminder of the strength it took to keep going, to start over from nothing. In the end, it wasn't about forgetting the past but learning to live with it, to build a future that didn't ignore the lessons learned from the pain and the loss. It was about carrying those scars with a sense of understanding, of acceptance, and moving forward, one step at a time, into a future that was still mine.